Adnan Syed, innocent or guilty? Personally, I believe Syed is innocent. I think that he was wrongly imprisoned. But why? After examining evidence from both the podcast Serial and secondary sources, I found some interesting evidence proving Adnan should be a free man. The evidence that points towards Syed's innocence should not be overlooked. Both of Asia's letters and affidavits are crucial because she serves as an alibi, his only alibi. Both the time at which Hay died and how she was slayed are also important in proving Syed's innocence. The inconsistencies in Jay's story discredit him as a witness, but he is the only alleged witness. Ronald Lee Moore, a very violent individual, was never even on the radar for a suspect, though he should be. Lastly, and paramount to all else, no physical evidence was found on Hay's body suggesting her ex-boyfriend killed her. On the contrary, what helped to convict Adnan includes the fact that Asia never spoke at trials. His only alibi was never asked to speak despite her efforts to reach out to Syed's lawyer. This was very crucial because of the lack of security footage proving Adnan had been in the library at 3:30 p.m. on January 13th, the day Hay was killed. The only alleged witness, Jay, reports being shown Hay's body in the trunk of Adnan's car and helping him bury her corpse. The last detail that may have been considered when convicting Adnan was his supposed possessive behavior towards Hay, as reported by her friends. It seems more likely that after Hay ended things with Adnan, he became bitter, but to the extent of murder, I don't think so. Let's start with the first piece of evidence proving Adnan is innocent. Asia. Asia is Adnan's classmate and alibi, though they weren't close friends. More importantly, she was Adnan's only alibi. Asia wrote Adnan 2 letters, one on March 1st and the other on March 2nd. Her first letter, as shown on the left, indicates that she saw and spoke to Adnan the day he was killed. Though she never appeared in court, her letters were written after Adnan had been arrested because she wanted to help him. Clearly, because he did not murder Hay. Her involvement wasn't for attention. She clearly wanted to help Adnan because of his innocence. Even though no security footage was recovered proving Adnan was in the library, Asia remembers him, and her boyfriend being jealous of their interaction. Moving on, we have to analyze the time of death. Hay, Adnan's ex-girlfriend, was determined to have been killed approximately around 3:30 p.m. on January 13, 1999. It was never determined where she was killed, but Jay recalls seeing her body in the trunk of Adnan's car. This is important because fixed frontal lividity appeared on Hay's body. This occurs after a person has been dead for around 8 to 10 hours. However, Hay was found in a different position than the postmortem lividity suggests, meaning her body had to have been stored somewhere else and then moved to the burial site, because it just doesn't match up. There's a picture of what fixed lividity looks like to the right, as you can see. This video does a great job at explaining livor mortis.
Now, livor mortis is the skin discoloration caused by the pooling of blood. This happens because when the heart stops beating, the blood stops circulating, it stops moving. Therefore, gravity is going to make it settle to the lowest position of the body. And when it settles, it will turn the body like a bluish, red, purplish, dark blue, purplish color when it's fixed. In this picture, you can see that the person died with their hand on their chest, it looks like, or their stomach, in that position. So you can tell this by the white lines on the stomach and the way the hand was being held. As far as the timeline of livor mortis, the way that this works, it starts happening immediately after death, and it's visible within a couple of hours. The skin is typically a pinkish bluish, and it's very blotchy at the beginning. 5 to 6 hours in, the blotches have started to join up, but the skin still turns white when it's being pressed on. 10 to 12 hours from that, the blue-purple color remains when pressed, so it no longer turns white. It shows where a body is in contact with something, and this also helps determine if the body has been moved after death. 12 to 24 hours in, the body has been, or the livor mortis has been fixed, meaning that the blood is settled completely. It is no longer moving. In the picture, you can tell that this person died on their back, so they were supine, because of the white patch at the top of the back and the top of the buttocks. The low back was the lowest point of gravity, so that is where the blood had settled. This is the blanching I was talking about. So if you put pressure on the lividity and it does not stay the purplish color, you are in the blanching area, which is about 5 to 6 hours in. Okay. The different sites of livor mortis will depend on the position of the body before death. So if the person is supine, meaning they are laying on their back, then you should expect to see shoulders, buttocks, and heels will be white, meaning that that is where they are in contact of the ground or the seat or wherever.
It is important to understand what livor mortis is and how it works, because Jay said he and Adnan buried the body around 7:15 p.m. in all of his interviews, yet Hay was killed around 3:30 p.m. Livor mortis would not have time to set in yet, meaning Adnan could not have killed her. How Hay was murdered is also important. It is known that she died on January 13th around 3:30 p.m. due to manual strangulation. Killing someone by strangling them is very personal because of how close the attacker and the victim get to one another. That being said, the close quarters would allow the victim to fight back easily. Adnan, not having experienced strangling people or being violent, as per no previous record, would likely want to choose a foolproof method to kill Hay. Too many things could have gone wrong. She could have survived, or DNA could have been found. Assuming Hay would have fought back, there was no evidence of battle wounds recorded on Adnan. If he really wanted to kill her, he would have most likely have planned it out, especially not having any prior experience. Now let's talk more about Jay. Jay was Adnan's close friend who supposedly helped him bury the body. Moreover, he was the only witness. Jay was interviewed 4 separate times. However, there were inconsistencies amongst all of his interviews. Jay just can't get his facts straight. That makes him a less credible witness, though he was the only witness. One thing worth mentioning is how his story changes each time, seemingly to demonize Adnan. Jay ultimately pleads guilty to accessory murder. The insight he gave about Adnan and the guilty plea would most likely reduce his sentence. Well, I believe what he said was him acting to protect himself. What seemed to be completely ignored during Adnan's trial was the possibility of a serial killer. Ronald Lee Moore is a dangerous man who spent his life in and out of prison. He was released just 10 days before Hay was killed and was found guilty of slaying another Korean woman in the past. What is interesting is that she was killed almost the same way as Hay, with blunt force and manual strangulation. How could this be a coincidence? The women were both killed the same way and the same rates. His release was just days before Hay's death, 10 days, yet he was never a suspect. Lastly, there was no physical evidence proving Adnan had killed Hay. No DNA. No footprints or anything left behind, and no nothing. Adnan's DNA wasn't found anywhere, but he was still convicted. In conclusion, Adnan is not guilty. Asia's letters and affidavits prove that she spoke to him on the time and day Hay was killed, and that she saw him in the library. The time of death and something called livor mortis proves that Adnan wouldn't have been able to kill her when Jay suggested he did. How Hay was murdered was also another big thing. She definitely would have left her mark and fought back. She was an athlete. The inconsistencies in Jay's story just don't make him credible. So why should we believe him? Ronald Lee Moore completely went under the radar, even though he was dangerous and he has killed before. And no evidence was found proving Adnan had been guilty. Adnan is not guilty. Moving on, let's discuss this slideshow. Why did I choose to represent my opinion using a voiceover in a slideshow? To make my decision about what media to use, I first had to decide what's important. The task was to explain my opinion pertaining to Adnan's guilt or innocence. In order to effectively explain my ideas, I wanted to choose a medium which allowed organization of ideas, visuals to help the audience better understand, highlight and make the supporting evidence to my opinions very prominent, easily communicate my ideas, and transition smoothly between topics. A slideshow was a perfect choice. Using a slideshow allowed me to easily express and organize my ideas, convey importance with visuals and verbally, and include my images to support my opinion and provide examples. Also, to be creative. This prevents the audience from being bored. If they're bored, they aren't going to absorb what I'm saying. I believe that other mediums would have been less effective. Why? Being able to manipulate ideas is the easiest way for me to learn, and therefore it is the best way for me to explain and project. A podcast puts emphasis on language and clear explanations because the audience isn't able to see anything. The video shown about livor mortis uses pictures to help the viewers understand exactly what it is. That's why I included it in my presentation, because it is so crucial to understanding my point. Without visuals, viewers would have had a tougher time understanding, and basically the whole purpose of bringing up the time Hay was killed would have been lost. Moving on, creating a painting or another piece of art for this assignment would have been fun, but very symbolic, and the intent may not be obvious. The purpose of this task is expressing my opinion. Symbols can often have unique and different meaning between individuals. Some people may be confused as to why certain symbols are being included. The message the audience will perceive can be very subjective. I am trying to explain my personal opinion, and that can be difficult to convey through art. I don't want the message the audience receives to be subjective. It's my opinion, and that's what I want them to get out of it. So a painting or a sculpture would not be a good choice for this assignment. And last of all, a website could have been used, and though websites are very interactive with the user, they can sometimes be boring and content heavy. If my audience is bored, they won't care what I'm saying and take nothing away. Choosing an effective medium for the job can help avoid that, hence why I chose the slideshow. To conclude, let's put all these ideas together. Using a slideshow with a voiceover was the most effective way for me to clearly communicate my opinion. I was able to use and include pictures to aid my explanations, which I did for Asia's affidavits and the livor mortis. I was able to convey the most important ideas through text, and I did that when I was explaining all my pieces of evidence. I had the who, what, where, when, how, everything I wanted to be taken away. I was also able to include my voice, just as one would in a class presentation, allowing me to use my voice and other elements to add emotion. Emotion is effective because emotion it makes the audience care. It makes them want to listen. If I can make you feel, I'm successful. I was also able to incorporate multimedia like videos and music if I chose to make my opinion more effective. The video explaining livor mortis was used to help the audience better understand what it was, so they would be able to get my point. I was also able to be creative and organize my videos. Thank you for listening.